There is something moving beneath the surface right now. And if you have been picking up on it lately, if something in you has been quietly alert and paying attention, that feeling is not coming from nowhere. It is not your mind playing tricks on you. It is not longing dressed up as intuition. Something real is happening. Something is building inside the person you have been thinking about, and it has everything to do with you. They may not be showing it. On the outside, they might look the same as always, calm, composed, maybe even distant or a little cold. They may go through their days as if nothing is weighing on them, as if the connection between you was something they filed away and moved on from. But that surface is not the whole story. Beneath it, something much more significant is taking shape. A truth they have been carrying for a long time, one they have tried to push aside, rationalize, and outrun, is becoming too heavy to keep managing, and slowly, quietly, a decision is forming in the deepest part of who they are. What I want you to understand before anything else is this. What is happening inside them right now is not simply about whether they miss you. It goes much further than that. It is about what your connection revealed inside them. It is about what it forced to the surface when they could no longer outrun themselves. Something about what passed between you reached places in them they did not know how to handle. It stirred things that had been sitting still for a long time. And now that those things have been stirred, there is no easy way to put them back. Stay with this because what I am about to walk you through matters. What they are deciding right now is not small. It is not the kind of choice that gets made in an afternoon and forgotten by the weekend. This is a turning point in the truest sense. They are standing at a place in their inner life where the road ahead forces them to be honest, and honesty at that level changes a person. Whether they ultimately move towards you or take a different path, they will not come out of this moment the same. Something is being settled. Something is being resolved. And the quiet tension you have been sensing all along, that low hum, that strange feeling that something is on the verge of shifting, it has a source. It is real. The distance you have felt has a reason behind it. The silence has something underneath it. The mixed signals, the moments of warmth followed by coldness, all of it is pointing towards something that is happening deep inside them. An internal battle that has been building for a while and is now reaching its peak. What comes next is going to show you something important. It is going to reveal what they are actually made of when fear can no longer hide behind excuses and avoidance can no longer serve as a solution. What you are picking up on is not wishful thinking. It is not the kind of thing the mind invents when it wants something badly enough. It is the quiet, unmistakable energy of another person wrestling with their own truth. You touched something in them, something real and lasting. And right now, in the private space of their own mind and heart, they are standing at a crossroads where every path seems to circle back in your direction. For a long time, they tried to make that stop. They reached for distractions. They buried themselves in routine, in work, in the comfortable noise of everyday life. They leaned on pride and manufactured distance to keep themselves from having to look directly at what they were feeling. They told themselves that time would do the work for them, that if they waited long enough, if they stayed quiet long enough, the intensity would loosen its grip. They tried to convince themselves that what they felt was temporary, that it was the kind of thing that fades when you stop feeding it. But some things do not fade on demand. Some connections do not weaken with distance. The more they pushed against this one, the more it pushed back. The more they tried to dismiss it as something manageable, the more their inner life continued to treat it as something that mattered, as something unfinished, as something alive. And that is because what happened between you was never surface level. It was not the kind of interaction that skims the top and moves on. It reached deeper than that. It touched the parts of them that cannot be quietly erased when life becomes inconvenient. So now they are doing something they did not plan to do. They are looking back, not just at you, not just at what you meant to them, but at themselves, at what this connection says about who they have become, at what it has asked of them, at the gap between the person they show the world and the person they felt themselves becoming when they were close to you. And when someone starts honestly examining the story they told themselves, when the version of events they constructed to feel okay starts developing cracks, change is already underway. It is already closer than it appears. Here is what you need to understand about the choice they are wrestling with. It is not simply a question of whether to come back or stay gone. That is the surface version of the decision. The real version, the one happening underneath, is about whether they are ready to face themselves honestly, whether they are brave enough to drop the performance and live from their actual feelings. That is the deeper fear. Not just fear of you, not just fear of the relationship, but fear of what genuine honesty about themselves would require. Part of them is pulled toward you in a way that feels almost gravitational, natural, inevitable. Your absence does not sit quietly for them. It is not neutral. It has a weight. It leaves a shape in the space where you used to be, and no matter how much they try to fill that space with other things, the shape remains. Something keeps pulling their attention back, even when they are working hard to look anywhere else. But another part of them resists with equal force, because choosing you, really choosing you with honesty and openness, would require something they have not always been willing to give. It would mean letting their guard down fully. It would mean being seen in ways that feel frightening. It would mean setting aside the image they have protected and the walls they built over years of learning that vulnerability gets you hurt. Real change is not comfortable. It does not ease you in gently. It demands that you let go of the version of yourself that felt safe, even if that version was never fully true. That is why the energy around this has felt heavier lately. That is why the connection feels charged even in the silence. They are no longer just running from what they feel. They are beginning to sit with it. And sitting with it forces certain questions to rise. Why do you still live in their thoughts when they have tried so hard to evict you? Why does your memory keep returning in the quiet moments, in the spaces between distraction and sleep, when the noise of the day has finally stopped? Why has no one else been able to produce what your presence once made them feel? These questions do not have comfortable answers, and the mind can only fight itself for so long before it has to pick a side. There comes a point where the inner conflict reaches a kind of threshold, where the mask starts to loosen and the carefully constructed story starts to unravel. That point is approaching. What happens when it arrives will tell you something important, not just about how they feel, but about who they are. If they choose to come back, it will not be because the path became easy. It will not be because everything suddenly lined up or the fear disappeared. It will be because they finally recognized something that cannot be manufactured or replaced. The rare quality of what you shared together. The kind of depth that does not get recreated simply by moving on and finding someone new. Some things are genuinely singular. Some connections carry a weight and a meaning that make everything else feel thin by comparison. And when a person stops running long enough to actually feel that, it changes their calculations entirely. And if they choose to walk away instead, that will not be a verdict on you. It will not mean your love was lacking. It will not mean you were not enough. It will mean they were not ready for what loving you honestly would have asked of them. It will mean the level of inner work, the degree of vulnerability and growth that being with you would have required, was more than they were able to step into at this point in their life. That is their limitation, not yours. This is why your job right now is not to chase, not to strategize, not to try to engineer the outcome you want by filling every silence or sending the right message at the right moment. Let the truth do what truth does when it is left alone to work. Let time strip away what words could not. What is unfolding inside them is not a passing mood. It is a full and genuine internal conflict, and it is demanding resolution. On one side of that conflict is everything that draws them toward you: memory, warmth, the specific feeling of being near you that nothing else has been able to replicate, a sense of belonging that other people and other experiences have not been able to produce. On the other side is the old protective voice, the one that was built over a long time from pain and disappointment and moments when opening up led somewhere that hurt. That voice tells them to hold the line. Stay back. Stay guarded. Stay where it is safe. These two forces are not taking turns politely. They are colliding. The pressure is becoming impossible to sit with. They may be doing everything they can to seem normal and unbothered. They may keep themselves filled with activity and surrounded by noise. But the harder they work to bury this, the more it surfaces, because the real war was never in the outside world. It was always inside, And that is exactly why what happens next carries so much weight. The external moves they make, or do not make, are not going to resolve what is happening inside them. Only their own honesty can do that. You became something significant in their life. Even if neither of you fully saw it while it was happening, something about this connection worked on them in a way that ordinary interactions do not. It found the version of them that lived beneath the image they maintained for the world. Beneath the carefully controlled exterior, beneath the habits and patterns they relied on to keep themselves feeling safe, there was something more alive, more honest, more real. And your connection touched that version of them. It did not just visit, it reached in and held on. Now they are facing the full weight of that. They can stay inside the familiar limits of the person they have always been. They can keep the same walls and the same distance and the same version of the story where they are the composed one who is not affected. Or they can step into a version of themselves that they have not fully inhabited yet. A version that requires softness and courage and the willingness to be emotionally present in a way that feels genuinely risky. That is what this crossroads is really about. It is not just a decision about a relationship. It is a decision about identity, about who they want to be from this point forward. The effort of holding that tension is exhausting them. You can see it in the inconsistency, the push and pull, the moments when they seem to be softening and moving closer, and then the sudden pullback, the return of the walls, the cold or distant energy that does not quite match the warmth that was just there. That inconsistency is not always strategy. It is not always about control or manipulation. Sometimes, maybe more often than it looks, it is what happens when a person genuinely wants the connection but is terrified of what saying yes to it fully would mean for them. They want the warmth without the risk. They want the closeness without the exposure, and that is not a sustainable place to live. As the pressure builds and the internal struggle intensifies, things begin to burn away. The comfortable illusions start to go first. They cannot keep telling themselves that you were just a moment, just one chapter among many, just a feeling that would naturally dissolve. It is not dissolving, it is doing the opposite. The attempt to minimize you has failed completely, and now they are being brought face to face with a more accurate picture, not just of who you are and what you meant, but of who they are and what they have been choosing. Old memories are resurfacing. Shared moments are being replayed with more feeling attached to them now, not less. Silences that once felt manageable now feel louder. Each absence you leave in the space where connection once was is saying something they can no longer talk themselves out of. And this uncomfortable, unwelcome clarity is doing necessary work. Because real choices do not come from avoidance. They come from the moment when the fog starts to thin and the heart stops being willing to hide under the weight of fear. And that thinning is happening now, quietly, yes, slowly maybe, but it is happening. There is a limit to how long a person can carry the weight of divided feelings, and they are getting close to that limit. Not because anything dramatic happened on the outside, but because the mind cannot stay split forever. They have been managing these feelings for a long time now by telling themselves it was not that serious, by convincing themselves they could handle it or outgrow it, or simply wait until it became less loud. But feelings that go this deep do not stay quiet when you ignore them. They do not obediently shrink. They grow in the silence. They mature in the absence. They wait, patient and persistent, until the person carrying them can no longer pretend they are not there. And now those feelings are returning in full. They show up late at night when there is nothing left to distract with. They surface in the still moments, in between everything, in the seconds before sleep or in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, when something small triggers a memory that leads straight back to you. In the quiet that follows a busy day, when all the noise stops, their mind goes back, naturally, without effort, almost involuntarily. And that natural return is telling them something they can no longer keep dismissing. Your absence has been doing powerful work in this. By not rushing to fill every space, by not chasing, by giving them room to sit with themselves, you left them alone with their own thoughts. And the silence you left behind became a kind of mirror. Without the comfort of your energy there to soften the distance, They had to face what your absence actually felt like. The full, unfiltered weight of it. The missing safety. The missing ease. The specific way your presence used to make them feel that nothing else has managed to replicate. This is a crucial part of the process. When someone finally has to sit inside the actual shape of what is gone, they stop asking themselves whether it mattered. They start asking whether they waited too long to admit that it did. In quiet moments, they find themselves comparing. Not always deliberately, not always with words. But the comparison happens. What they felt near you against what they feel in every other part of their life. And the difference does not close. It keeps presenting itself. Not because you were perfect, not because the connection was without difficulty, but because the depth of it was real. The way it made them feel more present, more alive, more genuinely themselves, that was real. And real things leave a mark that fantasy cannot replicate. This is why everything is shifting now from the inside out. They are approaching a place where living in the middle is no longer tolerable, where being half present and half absent, half committed and half withdrawn, is costing them too much. The cost of indecision is becoming clearer than the cost of choosing. And that shift in perspective is a significant one. They are beginning to understand that the honest path forward requires them to stop hiding behind the comfortable vagueness of maybe. Inside them, fear and genuine desire have moved into the same space. They are no longer taking turns. They are both fully present, fully activated, pressing against each other with everything they have. On one side is everything that pulls toward you, warmth and familiarity and something that feels like home even now. On the other side is a fear that is not abstract but deeply personal, the fear of being exposed, the fear of handing their heart to someone and finding themselves vulnerable in the particular way that can hurt. And maybe that fear was never entirely about you. Maybe it was carried in long before you arrived, built from old moments when trust was met with disappointment, when openness led somewhere painful. But no matter where that fear was born, it has been loud. It has been the loudest voice in the room for a long time. And what is changing now is that something else is beginning to speak louder. The desire, the truth, the part of them that is tired of choosing fear over and over again and calling it wisdom. That part is gaining ground. It is no longer willing to sit quietly while fear runs the show. And that shift, that small but real movement from defense toward truth, matters enormously. It means something genuinely different is beginning to take over. That is why the back and forth has felt so unstable. One day they seem ready to stop resisting, ready to move toward what is real, to step out from behind the walls and finally let themselves feel what they have been denying. The next day, fear comes rushing back in, and everything closes off again. Both sides feel completely real to them in those moments. The longing feels true. The fear also feels true. That is what makes it so difficult to watch from the outside. They are not playing games. They are genuinely caught between two things that both have a claim on them. But no one can live in that storm indefinitely. Every storm has an end, and eventually one force will take the lead. They will either allow fear to keep them standing at a safe distance, or they will let the deeper current of what they actually feel carry them somewhere new. And that choice is bigger than a relationship. It is a choice about identity, about the kind of person they are going to be from this point on, about whether they are going to continue making decisions out of self-protection or whether they are going to start making decisions out of genuine truth. That moment is arriving faster than they expected. Until recently, they were able to stay in the comfortable fog of uncertainty, turning thoughts over and over, studying signs, replaying memories, trying to apply logic to something that was never going to respond to logic. But feelings that carry this much weight are not patient forever. They demand an answer, and the confusion and the longing and the reflection have all been building steadily toward one unavoidable point, a real choice, one they can no longer defer. As it approaches, they may become more restless, more distant in the short term. Do not interpret that as a sign that the answer is no. Sometimes the final silence before truth is the deepest silence of all. Sometimes the last stretch of distance before someone moves toward you looks indistinguishable from the distance of someone who is gone for good. The difference is in what is happening underneath. And underneath, something very different from absence is taking place. They are beginning to see that living in the in-between is not the safe option they once believed it to be. Staying neither fully present nor fully gone has stopped feeling like protection. It has started to feel like a drain. It costs them peace. It keeps them locked in a loop that gets smaller every time it repeats. And now they are feeling the weight of that cost directly. They are beginning to understand that avoiding the choice was always going to lead here, that it was never a way out. It was only ever a delay. That means the space they have been hiding in is shrinking. The room to stay vague and uncommitted is getting smaller. And inside that shrinking space, something like honesty is beginning to fill the gaps. They are being pressed to take responsibility for what they feel, to look at it directly instead of through the comfortable blur of denial. And taking responsibility at that level requires stripping away the excuses. It requires asking honest questions, hard ones, whether they are prepared to risk the comfort of the life they know for a connection that would demand real growth, whether they are willing to be the person that kind of love asks them to become. There is a finality beginning to settle in. The era of maybe is closing. The era of truth is taking its place. Deep in some part of them, they already knew this was not just a passing feeling or a temporary emotional season. It was a marker, a threshold, one of those moments that divides a life into before and after. The hesitation that once felt like reasonable caution is starting to feel like a cage. They are beginning to understand that waiting to feel ready was never going to produce readiness. All it produced was more time spent standing still in a place that was hurting them. So now the walls are beginning to fracture. Not dramatically, not all at once, but they are giving way under the pressure of what can no longer be denied. They are seeing the gap between what they felt and what they allowed themselves to act on. They are remembering the moments when they chose silence over speaking, when they pulled back instead of moving forward, when pride stood in the place where honesty should have been. That kind of clarity is uncomfortable. It can sting, but it is also powerful because it begins to close the distance between feeling and action. And when that distance closes, change does not remain theoretical. It becomes necessary. The truth is rising in a way that will not stay manageable. For a long time, they were genuinely skilled at containing their own emotions. They used logic to keep feeling at a distance. They used distance to avoid depth. They used silence as a way to avoid saying something they could not take back. But that containment strategy only works for so long before the pressure inside exceeds the strength of the container. When someone is left alone with their own thoughts long enough, the truth eventually rises above everything else. It becomes louder than every distraction and every defense they have built. That is where they are now, and it is not coming from outside pressure. No one is forcing this. It is an internal awakening. They are moving from fear and avoidance toward emotional clarity, finally recognizing the depth of what was lost, accepting their true feelings, and approaching a defining choice between staying protected or courageously living from truth.